Hi, everybody. Welcome to NewsNite for Friday, April 8th. All eyes on Washington. Will the government shut down, and what impact will that have locally? We'll talk about it. Is the city of Cuyahoga Falls going too far with its curfew for Rockin on the river, taking aim at the teenagers who are down there? We'll talk about that as well. And what to do with prescription drugs that you don't need anymore. A local police agency has a program that all of us should model. Those stories and more next on NewsNite. Rainy Friday here in the greater Akron area, but hopefully we can liven up your night. A lot to talk about. Let's get to it. Great to have Stephanie Warsmith here this week from the Akron Beacon Journal. And always great to have freelance journalist and contributor Jody Miller here with us this week. And of course, again, all eyes on Washington as the government considers whether it's going to shut down. Before we talk about the impact locally, how do we get to this point? Everybody knows we're in an economic crisis. Why can't we all just get along and figure this out?
I think, unfortunately, it's politics as usual. You've got the possibility here of a compromise, and granted, we're taping the program at 8 o'clock in the morning on Friday, and by the time it airs, there could be a possibility that the government will not shut down, that they will in fact reach a compromise. But to my mind, what I am hearing is that the Tea Party, the new Republicans in Congress that are primarily the Tea Party people, they have put an awful lot of pressure on the Republican Party to make sure that whatever compromise is reached has some ideological things tucked into that package. And they're not budging. They are not budging at all. They don't want to compromise. They feel that they've been sent to Washington with the American people telling them what they want out of their politicians, and they are going to hold that line, toe that line, and the government be damned.
Well, I agree with Jody. I think we have another example of partisan politics at play. And the question is, if this happens, which hopefully it won't, like Jody said, maybe they will be able to reach a compromise today, but will any of us notice? And I was thinking back to, we have lived through this in the not so, distant past, and I was trying to remember what happened, and I realized that there are some things like the Cuyahoga Valley National Park. If anybody was planning a trip to D.C. with their family here around the spring break period, they wouldn't be able to go to the Smithsonian. But for regular people who aren't planning to, make use of those federal amenities, it might be that we don't actually notice that much.
Wow, and that's the scary part. But when you think about it, it is spring. The park gets a lot of folks in the spring.
Right.
The railroad could shut down.
Well, I actually have a friend who is planning a trip on the railroad from the ORTA, the Ohio Rail Tourism Association. And they've got this big event scheduled for this weekend. And I mean, he's living on the edge because they've got all these people signed up to take the Cuyahoga Valley Scenic Railroad, from the Cleveland area all the way down south. And they don't know whether the trip is going to take place. So it's an inconvenience, obviously, in that respect. But for people who work for the government and who, in fact, can be laid off or furloughed, it could be a real hardship because there are not an awful lot of government employees who have enough savings in the bank to withstand any kind of extended furlough or layoff. And the problem is, and I will say this, and then Steph, you can jump in. And I heard a commentator say this on the way into work this morning, that the problem is not necessarily that the government shuts down. It's what do the American people think of the inability of politicians to run the government, and it leaves them with a bad taste in their mouth.
Right, and I think that we've continually seen that frustration with government, and I think that it was the reason that you had such a Republican wave in the last election. But now we have those Republicans in there, and yet we still aren't able to get, make any progress, reach across sides and come up with a solution. And so I do think that is very frustrating, and the people in general probably are rolling their eyes and come on. You can't sit down and hash this out and make it so that our federal government doesn't shut down for the second time. And I think it was 94, 95 when it happened. Right. It's not really been that long ago.
Right, exactly.
Well, I noticed yesterday, as they kept cutting to Washington and back the networks, that Harry Reid and John Boehner from Ohio, they both were very moderate with their comments. It really wasn't the nastiness we've seen in politics in so long. So if it shuts down, who does get the blame?
Well, you know what? I'm not sure who gets the blame. I think the Republicans would like to blame the president for not stepping in fast enough to try to break the impasse. I think the Democrats would like to blame John Boehner for not being able to control the Tea Party candidates and that arm of the Republican Party. And I think the Republicans would like to blame the Democrats because they're saying they're not giving enough. So, you know, it's past the buck here, guys. Mm-hmm. And in the meantime, we all out here in the hinterlands, we flounder. The
hinterlands, I love it. Well, when we talk about blame, there's a lot of blame to go around when it comes to the sewers here in the area, and who really deserves it? Steph, when we look at this issue, this thing is just a monster.
Yes, it is the story that I hate to write about that won't go away. Mm-hmm. So
and the latest chapter is what?
The latest chapter was Monday night at Akron City Council. They wanted to move forward with 2 projects, which actually in the scope of what we're talking about potentially being a $1 billion project, these total together about $5.3 million. They are 2 sewer separations where you take apart the sanitary and the stormwater. And, you know, then there were some people, including Mike Williams, who is running for Akron mayor this year, as we all know, who were saying, look, we don't have this federal lawsuit settled. We don't have an agreement with the EPA. We shouldn't be spending any more taxpayer money until we have all of that settled. But yet Plisquelic and his supporters were saying, you know, these are things that we know we need to do, and we want to show that, you know, cleaning up the river is important to us, and this is a way for us to show it, to show that, you know, to move forward with this. And so they did go ahead and approve doing this. They don't know whether the EPA is going to approve the permits for them to move forward with the work.
Steph's right. It's a between a rock and a hard place, to be honest with you, because obviously, you know, the city, I think, wants to clean up the river, but they're forestalled from doing so by the federal EPA and Judge Adams at this point. But I think this was an effort on their part to do what they could, small though it might be, $5.2 million and 2 particular areas, but it's not unlike what the city did several years ago with RAC 40 down like at the Talmadge area, the Talmadge Parkway and Memorial Parkway area, where they literally built a huge, massive cement tunnel, you know, to help with the sewer overflows. And I think their perspective is, okay, if we can at least show good faith effort, you know, this is not a large project by any means. It's one that, you know, if the suit goes forward, if the agreement goes forward, they're going to have to do anyway. And I think it's the way for the city to get in front of this and at least show some good faith effort in trying to clean up at least a portion of it.
And you mentioned Mike Williams and his vote on this. Are you alluding that he wants this to drag out a little longer?
Well, his basic, you know, argument on it was really, you know, it doesn't make sense. We should wait until at least we have, you know, this lawsuit at a point where we know we need to be doing this instead of something else. Mm-hmm. You know, that his overall concern was that the city not waste any money when they know they're going to be needing to put a heck of a lot into this whole huge sewer project. Mm-hmm. So. But I guess we'll wait and see what the EPA does, because they can't move forward with this work unless the EPA gives them, you know, the blessing that and says, okay, you can do this. And Akron really hasn't been able to do, you know, any new projects because the EPA hasn't been willing to approve them while they've been trying to work out an agreement.
And you mentioned Judge Adams, and I want to get your thoughts on that as we move the discussion now to newsnight.net.
For more NewsNight content, including extended discussions, full interviews, and the chance to speak your mind about the issues, join us online at newsnight.net.
What to do with prescription drugs? Getting rid of them, a big problem across the country. This week, Summit County launching a new program to hopefully address that problem, something Bath Township has used for quite some time. Earlier this week, Jody had a chance to sit down with Bath Police Chief Mike McNeely.
Well, I would applaud the Summit County Health Department. Mr. Terry Tuttle contacted me and asked about our program. He is now taking it to where he's enlisted the volunteer of 12 police agencies in the county, and this is a similar type of program. They have collection boxes which they've placed inside their police departments, and citizens can voluntarily, without identifying themselves, drop these off. What I hope to see is that the numbers that we're seeing now of accidental overdoses among our youth decrease, and hopefully it decreases significantly with programs like these.
Certainly a big problem across the country. Now we're addressing it locally. Great to welcome now Phil Trexler from the Akron Beacon-Journal to our discussion. And Jody had a chance to sit down with Chief McNeely. He makes a strong case that, you know, this is something we can't ignore.
Oh, absolutely. And in Bath, they have not ignored it because Chief McNeely brought this kind of a program to Bath back in the late 2009. And in fact, during the course of our interview, I found out that in the first year of operation, when Bath had a retrofitted lime green mailbox cemented or chained down to the police department parking lot, they collected over 1,000 pounds. That's a lot of drugs, of prescription and unused medications.
Wow.
You know, but the thing is, Summit County's launched a program, and it's called DUMP, Dispose of Unused Medications Properly. And now there are 12 communities, including Bath, where at different police stations around the county, they have the ability, they have a box set up where anybody can walk in with their prescription drugs that are expired, unused, they just want to get rid of. You blot out your name on they would like it in the same container it comes in. You blot out your name, and then you anonymously, you just put them into the mailbox, and then these communities then will take those drugs and incinerate them.
Do we really see overdoses with this stuff?
Overdoses? It's not so much about the overdose. I mean, there's a safety issue involved here. I think it's an environmental issue. The Associated Press really got this ball rolling 3 or 4 years ago when they did an investigative piece that found actual prescription drugs that are disposed in, you know, sewers or water eventually make it back into our drinking water. They found traces of various drugs, and that raised some red flags. And we've learned that this, you know, throwing it down the toilet is not the proper way to dispose of your drugs. Absolutely. So what they've done is organize these campaigns, and I know they've done it for a while in Bath, and they're doing it in other cities as well. So it's you know.
But again, it's Summit County that has really kind of taken the lead in this.
So any police agency in the county will
No,
take
there's
them?
only 12. Akron, Barberton, Bath.
So most of them.
Most of the police agencies in the county. And if you go to the website, actually go to the Bath Township website, you can see an entire list of all this information. But to get back to your question, the problem that they are finding nationwide with prescription drug use is particularly the vulnerable population of teenagers and adolescents who go into the medicine chest at home and think because it's a prescription drug, it might in fact be safe. And they overuse them, abuse them, and according to Mike McNeely, other than traffic fatalities, you know, the largest cause of death for teenagers happens to be overuse of drugs, and it's prescription drugs in most cases.
Yeah, it's a huge issue statewide. I know Mike DeWine, the Attorney General, has started some programs here. Prescription overdoses is a huge issue. Our medical examiner, Lisa Kohler, has spoken out about it, and this is certainly one thing. The accidental overdose deaths are just skyrocketing, not only in our area, but statewide, nationally as well.
As we're talking about teens taking center stage in a decision from Cuyahoga Falls as they consider a curfew aimed specifically at the Rockin' on the River crowds on Fridays. It's a very popular time for people to come down there. Those concerts will be starting soon. Is this really their way of getting around having to police these kids, or are the teens really out of control with these
I think
concerts?
it's a way of telling a parent how to police their own child. You know, this is an economic driving force for the city. You're trying to attract folks down there, and there's an awful lot of complaints about unruly teens and gangs and whatnot disrupting the facility, the performances, or just, you know, if people are trying to have a good time, and you got to worry about teenagers hanging around and disrupting everything. So the complaints have been going on for a long time, and this is the way that they're going to try to address this. And yeah, I think they're probably going to learn a lesson from the flats in Cleveland, which was you know, a hot spot to be in the 80s and 90s, and then went downhill because of you know, people have to feel safe, and if you don't feel safe and secure in your environment, you're not going to go. So I know that the Rockin' in the River means a lot to the economy there in the Falls, and they want to keep it a nice, friendly, safe place to go, and this is their way of, you know, putting a thumb down on the parents to get them to take care of their kids.
Don't forget, remember a couple years ago we started talking about the same kind of problem with Chapel Hill Mall. You know, where they put a restriction on kids who could just come there, be dropped off by parents and band around and move around and just have no supervision whatsoever. And you know, it's a difficult decision, because you have the parents who want to say, hey, you know, my child is 17, 18 years old, they should be free to go where they want. But Phil is absolutely right. It's a question of perception in a lot of cases. When an area begins to be a gathering place for a lot of young people, unfortunately, people don't feel safe. They feel somewhat threatened. You get the whole gang and group mentality here. And it'll be interesting to see what, in fact, the Falls Council decides to do, because I think it's if your child is under 18 and is not accompanied by an adult, you know, they can arrest them. Or not arrest them, but take them down to the station and make the parents come and get them.
Well, let's face it, too, is that adults go to these places to get away from these teenagers. And certainly, I mean, this is a great law for grown-ups.
But the second part of this is the parents will be fined $50. $50 to get your kid back. Think about that for a minute. But still, $50, is that fair when the parents aren't the one going where they're not supposed to?
Well, you can't find the kids. I mean, the kids don't have $50. I mean, their allowance is, what, $5, $10 a week? And
well, wait a minute here. The parent has a responsibility until that child is an adult, which he's not until, what, 18 or 21, depending on what legality you want. You know, the parent is in charge here and is supposed to be in charge here. So, yes, the parent should be fined. You know, if they don't know where their children are. Now conversely, I heard a young teenager talk, and he's right. There needs to be a gathering place for young people, and I don't know how we go about balancing those two aspects of socialization. But yes, the parent needs to be in charge, I think. Of course, I'm sitting here with, 35-year-old kids. I don't have to deal with it anymore.
Well, we've got some time. We're talking about parents. One local parent who makes headlines whenever we don't want her to make headlines is Gloria James. She's made headlines, of course, as LeBron's mom with issues throughout the years LeBron's been here. Now she's in Miami. She makes headlines again. We'll talk about it. Jody, go ahead.
I just want to say my one comment. LeBron James took not only his talents, but his mother to South Beach.
Arrested this week, if you hadn't heard, for a misdemeanor assault charge. But beyond what she did, isn't this the last thing that LeBron needs right now?
No, it's Gloria, being Gloria. I mean,
is it newsworthy?
No, but it is.
Does it belong on ESPN?
No, but it is.
I mean, Gloria is a character.
He's the most high-profile athlete in the world, and his mother, we all know. I mean, she's Gloria, and some folks are saying that they're surprised it didn't happen sooner. There's no surprise here. You feel bad for LeBron because he's obviously embarrassed by the situation, and who wouldn't if your mother's arrested, 5 o'clock in the morning, drunk and slapping around a valet? I mean, that's pretty embarrassing, and the kid's embarrassed by it, and just hopefully that any problems that need to be addressed can be addressed with Gloria, and we can all move on. But this will be forgotten.
But you're right. This is not something this young man needs to deal with right now as he gets close to a playoff run. And Miami has not performed, I think, this season as well as people had thought that they would with the 3 big stars. They're in 3rd place, 4th place at this point in the Eastern Division. So no, it's not something that he needed at this time. But I think he's the adult in this relationship, to be honest.
Let's face it, he's used to this. I mean, this isn't the first time. He's used to it. And the fact that we're even discussing it is,
that's the one point I want to talk about now as we move this conversation to NewsNite.net.
On NewsNite.net, we cover a broader range of topics than we can on the air in 27 minutes. Be part of the conversation on our Facebook page and at NewsNite.net.
Again, you can watch the extended edition of our discussions as well as the long interviews that we did with Mike McNeely this week at NewsNite.net. I want to thank Jody for her time this week. Welcome, Steph, back to the panel. And Phil, you have a front page story today that had a lot of people's attention over the last few months of a murder with an ending none of us saw coming.
Yeah, it's a tragic case. Jackie Hilder was a vice president at First Merit Bank. She was found murdered inside her house in February. Just a stranger. This doesn't happen to people 60-year-old, and very affable, very friendly. She wasn't, in any kind of bank dealings or anything. Very unassuming type of woman. Found shot to death inside of her house. A the case has been unsolved since then. Akron Police have been working on it. We're looking for records, phone records, the usual bit. In fact, just last week they had met with the family of the victim, Jackie Hilder, and said, we're sorry, the case has really hit a kind of a wall. And lo and behold, like the next day or two, they get a phone call from authorities down in Texas, and they say that a guy down there has confessed to killing Jackie Hilder. And it turns out that the suspect, Muzi Madanda, was a business associate of Hilder's boyfriend, and they met in January, and this associate found out that the boyfriend was going to be out of town, thought that Hilder had a lot of money, and according to police, talked his way inside the house, wound up robbing her, killing her, then leaves and goes to Dayton, and he's accused of killing someone down there, and then goes to New Mexico where he kills 2 other people. So Miss Hilder was the first of 4 potential homicide victims of this man. And,
what set this guy off?
Well, according to the police, and they interviewed him, detectives Schaefer and Bell interviewed him for 3 hours. He immigrated from South Africa to try to find a better life here in America and send money back to his parents. And turns out he was not having a lot of success here, and changed course. Kind of went from trying to do it the legitimate way to robbing and killing people. And that's where it was all about, the money. He thought she would have money, and lo and behold, she had no cash at home to satisfy him.
Had Hilder ever met this guy?
Apparently not. He was just a loose associate that her boyfriend met by chance during a work in North Dakota in January, and it was just. They said the unfortunate part is that she said she was always a protective woman, would never let anyone inside her house, but somehow this guy talked his way inside, and there was no forced entry or anything like that. And
gotcha.
It's just unfortunate, but it was a very intriguing case because just who she was and the mystery of surrounding her death was
a killing spree that started here. Good reporting to bring
thanks.
it out today. I want all of us to weigh in on one other story you brought up this week, and that's speeding tickets in Akron, or a lack thereof.
Yeah, it was interesting. It started just to see how, in the last couple of years, how the number of speeding tickets have gone in terms of, I'm thinking manpower, being down, and the police union always talking about that. But the more I went back, the steeper the fall came in terms of the number of speeding tickets that were written. 20 years ago, they're writing 13,000 tickets. Now it's under 1,000 tickets, and a 90% drop in the number of speeding tickets that are issued by the department. And lo and behold, you find out that it's the traffic bureau that's been decimated by cutbacks within the department, and fewer traffic officers is translated into fewer traffic speeding tickets being issued.
Well, that might excite drivers to some point, Steph. That's lost revenue.
Right, at a time when the city could really use the money and is struggling financially, like so many cities are because of the downturn in the economy. But I will point out that when we found out that Phil was working on this story, that there was a lot of ribbing from us drivers who said, "This is a good thing. Why are you even writing about this? Because we don't want to get tickets." So, but it is true that it's lost revenue. How much revenue?
You can just estimate it's nearly $2 million a year that's potentially lost because of the 90% drop in the number of tickets being issued.
So we would suggest that the cops might want to pull Phil over, but not anyone else in the newsroom.
Sure, but in all seriousness, they would say they're not doing it to make revenue; they're doing it to keep people safe.
Right.
Is the department going to be able to bring back much of a traffic bureau?
I haven't gotten any indication. And talking to Paul Helinski, he's expecting 70 to 80 officers to take a retirement in lieu of Senate Bill 5. So I don't see the department growing. And again, I don't think any politician worth anything wants to lay off officers.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is that the police and fire take up a huge portion of their budget, and that's where the cuts have had to come. And unless things really pick up, I don't see a new cadet class coming through.
No, not nearly as busy in the clerk's office right now paying all those tickets either. Go ahead.
And I was just going to say, you've also got a lot of uncertainty because of the possible state cuts that are in the budget with the local government funds, and Plisquallic has said that that could translate into layoffs among police officers and firefighters, which is where the city has used those funds. Although, of course, the FOP says that doesn't necessarily mean that's where you need to cut, if you have to cut somewhere.
But the criticism of some of the suburbs across Ohio is they've increased the number of traffic tickets to try to make up for a lack of revenue. And here in Akron, that's not been the case. We have a few minutes left, and I want to touch on one other issue that Bob Dyer wrote about in the Beacon this week, and that's the new fence going up on the Y Bridge that we've talked about for so long. But, you know, we're talking about, 320 or 375 tons of weight going on top of this bridge.
Now, I've written extensively about this, Eric. I've been following the project as it goes along because I wanted to pick a stimulus project that was of great interest. This is of great interest. I will assure you that they have had structural engineers that have looked at the weight that they're adding to this bridge. When this was brought up one other time, one of the times that I wrote a story on this, somebody wrote a letter to the editor, and they had the engineer write in a response. They have checked, and this is structurally fine. The bridge can withstand the extra weight that is being added onto it.
They're confident.
They are confident. They have done all the studies. They have looked at this. The bridge is going to be fine. Now, I do understand the folks that think that this is a waste of money for them to be adding the fence on the bridge, that people are going to possibly just kill themselves another way. I understand that argument. And then there are people who have lost someone off that bridge that say, if this stops anyone, it's worth it.
But it's more than just a chain link that many people might have thought they would have seen.
Right.
As something, just a simple fence up there.
They have built it in a way that is supposed to deter people from being able to climb it. It's going to be 10 feet tall. It's going to have very small openings, so it's not going to be like a chain link, and it's they're hoping that it's going to be difficult for people to climb.
It certainly is one of the more panned stimulus projects. I know it's made national news in some respects because it sounds silly, but the fact is the fence probably should have been there when the bridge was built, and it's stimulus money and it's putting people to work, but it's easily subject to ridicule, right or wrong.
And debate we will on this show. Phil, Stephanie, and Jody, thank you so much for being with us this week. And remind you, you can read our blog and watch all the extended interviews, plus the long format interview we did with Mike McNeely on NewsNite.net. See you next Friday, everybody. Have a good weekend.